So in this video, we are going to be looking at cognitive development across the lifespan. I'm going to be starting with a very brief introduction to Piaget, and then I have provided a couple of videos that you will need to watch in order to understand his stages of cognitive development. I'm not going to go through them because I think those videos do a really great job. There will be multiple questions on that on the exam, so please spend time watching those videos. Now, cognitive development looks at how mental processes such as memory, problem solving, reasoning skills, decision making, etc., evolve throughout life. Now, Piaget was one of the first to suggest that children have these distinct cognitive abilities. He was administering intelligence tests on children, and he started noticing certain patterns of errors in their thinking. And he believed that these errors weren't just mistakes, but were actually representing distinct ways of thinking in children. And so he wanted to understand the reasoning children use to get certain answers. Okay, so he wasn't interested in whether they were getting the questions right or wrong. He was interested in the reasoning skills that they used to get to those answers. Why were they getting those answers wrong? What thinking pattern led to that answer? As a result of his research, he then suggested that cognitive development takes place in 4 stages, and so that's what you'll be learning about in those videos. But I first also want to look at some other terminology connected to Piaget's theory. So first of all, a schema, or schemata is the plural, a schema is a collection of ideas that represent a certain concept. Or in other words, it's a mental model of the world. So, for example, if I ask you to think of a construction worker, you will have all of these ideas about a construction worker that you will pull together to represent a construction worker in your mind. Okay? And that collection of ideas make up your schema of a construction worker. Okay? So it's this collection of ideas that allows you to represent whatever concept it is in your mind. As Piaget defined it, a schema is a mental representation that people use to understand and interact with the world. It tells us what to expect in a situation. Now, as children learn relationships in their environment and they continue to engage and learn, they develop these schemas. However, as they continue to engage with the world and they keep learning more, their schemas are going to need to adapt to incorporate that new information that they're learning. So, for example, let's say the only 4-legged animal a 3-year-old child has seen is a horse. Okay, their parents teach them that the animal they saw was a horse, and so they develop a schema of a 4-legged animal and they label it horse. However, one day they are out on a walk and they see a dog. Now, they've never seen a dog before, but they have this existing schema of a 4-legged animal, so they point to the dog and they say horse. Now, in this example, the child is engaging in what Piaget called assimilation. Okay, so the process of incorporating new objects or information into existing schemas, or using the existing schemas, that existing information, to understand new knowledge and experiences. Now, in this case, the information that the child is trying to add to the existing schema is incorrect. A dog is not the same thing as a horse. So here, the child needs to create a new schema. The parents will tell her, well, actually, no, that's not a horse, that's a dog. So, number one, she will need to alter her schema of a horse. Now she knows that not all 4-legged animals are horses. And now she will need to create a schema for a dog. Okay, this is called accommodation. So the process of altering or creating schemas to deal with new information that doesn't fit into the old ones. You can kind of think of this like sorting laundry. So you've got your pile of laundry, you pick up an item, and let's say it's a pair of socks. You start a pile for a pair of socks. You create this schema. Then you pull out a t-shirt. Well, that doesn't fit into the socks pile, doesn't fit into that schema, so you create a new one. You start a new pile. Then you pull out another pair of socks. This does fit into the existing schema you have, so you put that with the other socks. So every time you take a new item, you are either adding it to a schema that you've already got or a pile that you've already got, or you are creating a new one. Now, on this slide, we have a very brief overview of the 4 stages of his theory. As I said, I'm not going to go through all of this because you have a video that does a very good job of doing that. I believe he goes over everything that I have underlined in this. The only thing I don't believe he mentioned was he touches upon the topic of theory of mind, but I don't believe he actually calls it theory of mind. This can also be called cognitive empathy. I don't think he uses that term either. But the point is, theory of mind is when you are developing this understanding that other people have their own thoughts, their own belief systems, that other people have a mind that is separate from yours, essentially. So just so you're aware of that. Now, you have this in the slides that I've shared with you, but just to go through it and give you the answer, which will be clearer once you review those videos. Jane's mother has 2 crackers, both of equal size. She breaks one of the crackers up into 4 pieces. Jane says she wants the one with the most and immediately chooses the 4 pieces, even though the 2 are equal. Jane's choice illustrates Piaget's concept of conservation. Okay, I won't get into that now, but as you are watching the videos, you will learn about that and that will make sense. So moving on to cognitive development during adolescence. Now, according to Piaget, teenagers would be entering the formal operation stage. Now, he actually said that not everyone goes into that stage. That is the very last stage. But assuming that teenagers are, what you'd start to see is this ability to reason more logically, this ability to distinguish between abstract and hypothetical situations. Now, the question is, what is causing this change? And there are 2 theories as to what could explain these cognitive changes during adolescence, or this increase in the ability to think logically and hypothetically. One perspective is that this is due to an increase in mental capacity. So in other words, it's the result of new skills developing, okay? Other researchers believe that this is due to increases in processing speed and efficiency. So in other words, you're not learning new skills, the skills you already have are improving, okay? Which one of those it is, it's probably a combination of both. Now, you also start to see during the teenage years that they get better at thinking beyond the current moment. So they get better at planning ahead or looking into the future. And that comes back to the development of the frontal lobe. So remember in an earlier video, I mentioned that is still developing during adolescence, and that's the part of the brain involved in the ability to plan and think ahead. And so as that development is occurring, you see this improvement in the ability to think beyond the current moment. It's also during this time that the ability to understand other people's perspectives increases. So this comes back to theory of mind or cognitive empathy. So they have a better understanding that other people have their own thoughts and their own view of the world and their own feelings. You actually see a difference in when this increases in girls and boys. So in girls, you start to see an increase in theory of mind around age 13, and in boys, it's around age 15. This is important because this then leads to improvements in avoiding conflicts and in social problem solving, right? Because you're now, at this point, better able to understand that other people have their own mind, which makes you better at putting yourself in the other person's shoes, trying to see it from their perspective and trying to empathize with other people. And as your ability to empathize increases, that ability to manage conflicts is also increasing. It also means that you get better at understanding different sides of an argument and how to deal with that. The last thing I want to mention that you see during adolescence is this feeling of immortality. So this is the mentality that things won't happen to us. Now, this is actually something that we're seeing a lot of right now, even in adults. There are a lot of people that continue to go out and act as if we are not living through a pandemic, because some people just will have this mentality of, it won't happen to me. Now, in adolescence, this is a problem because teenagers are then much more likely to engage in risky behaviors. So you might tell them, you shouldn't drink and drive, this could happen, or you shouldn't take drugs because these are the consequences, but they will engage in some of those behaviors anyway because of this feeling of immortality, that bad things won't happen to me. Maybe they happen to other people, but I'll be fine. And so you see this increase in risky behaviors. Okay, so moving on to cognitive changes in adulthood. Now, usually a person's cognitive development reaches its peak during early adulthood. Remember, that's when the frontal lobe finishes developing. From that point, we start to see some decline in mental functioning. Now, overall, cognitive abilities remain steady through early and middle adulthood, but you do start to see processing speed start to decline. So processing speed is, how quickly your brain can do things and process information. So you start to see that slowed down. In middle adulthood, you can see memory start to decline. That's one of the main things people tend to think of when they think of cognitive changes in adulthood, is this decline in memory, but not necessarily. It can start to decline. There are things you can do, which I'll get to, that protect you against those declines. Now, it's not until older adulthood that we see more significant changes in cognitive abilities. And when it comes to crystallized intelligence, that seems to remain steady or actually improves. Now, remember, crystallized intelligence is your knowledge, your kind of general knowledge of information and your skill set. It makes sense that could potentially improve because as you get older, maybe you have more time on your hands once you retire and you read more and gain more knowledge, or you learn new skills. So you see that remain steady. It's fluid intelligence that you start to see decline. So remember, that's the ability to solve problems, to engage in abstract reasoning, to identify patterns and relationships. And so you start to see declines in those skills. However, as I mentioned, there are things you can do to protect yourself against some of these cognitive declines. What research shows is that participating in intellectually stimulating activities, so mental activities, can help preserve cognitive functioning. So, for example, playing mentally challenging games, making puzzles, reading, writing. I apologize because my dog's going crazy right now. Let's ignore that. So engaging in these intellectually stimulating activities, keeping your brain active, can help prevent some cognitive decline. You see less cognitive decline. What's interesting is research also shows that physical activity has the same effect. So staying physically active can help reduce the amount of cognitive decline that you experience in older adulthood.